Welcome to Good Friday here at Orchard Hill. It is good to be with you in person. Good to see many of you returning for maybe the first time in recent weeks in person. Great to be together online as well. And this evening, we started with music and communion to mirror the week where the Last Supper took place before the execution of Jesus Christ. And now we're going to take a few moments to consider the execution of Jesus Christ. And it's an odd thing, if you think about it, for people to gather all over the world, year after year, not just year after year, but really week after week, to commemorate somebody who died, and not just somebody who died, but somebody who was raised to life, and somebody who was executed in one of the most horrific ways that somebody could be executed at the time. The Roman government would execute its political prisoners. And they did it in such a way that it made it a deterrent to anybody else to ever come against the government. And so what they would do is they would crucify people. In fact, a historian, F.F. Bruce, writes about this, and he says that people did not refer to crucifixion by stating it. They just talked about people who were hung on an unfortunate tree because they didn't actually want to say the word crucifixion because it was considered impolite. It was so graphic. And this is what happened to Jesus. He was put on a cross, and as he grasped for breath and tried to lift himself up, soon the breath came out of him and he died. But just before he died, he uttered a phrase that we have in English. It's in John 19:30. And the phrase is, "It is finished." It's one of 7 things that Jesus is recorded to have said in the Gospels on the cross. And it's the second to last thing that we have recorded. The last thing is, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." But just before he died, he said, "It is finished." And in the original language, it's a single word. It's the Greek word tetelestai, and the word is a word that communicates something that Jesus cried out. And so tonight what I'd like to do is I'd like to take a few moments and think about the 3 English words that translate this Greek word tetelestai. It is finished. And so first I'd like to just talk about this idea of it. And the question is this, and that is, what is finished? What is it that Jesus finished on the cross? And certainly we could say it's his mission. Luke 19, verse 10 says that Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. And this is the mission that the church should have, every church. Here at Orchard Hill, we stated as our mission is to help people find and follow Jesus Christ because Jesus' mission was to seek and to save those that were lost. And when Jesus says it is finished, you could say that his mission was finished, at least in part, maybe not entirely, because there's still his resurrection, there's still his ascension, there's still his sending of his disciples out into the world. But the forgiveness aspect, where a price had to be paid, is what's finished. And sometimes where people object to the whole idea of Jesus is this idea that a price needs to be paid, that there needs to be a sacrifice. They'll say, are people really lost? People are neutral. You see this sometimes in our modern culture, because sometimes in our pop culture, what happens is when we start to talk about the idea of something not being right, what we quickly do is we say, this just isn't who we are. Let me give you a couple examples. Earlier this year, when there was a group that went into the Capitol, depending on where you stand politically, it was either a riot or it was a protest. But wherever you stand politically, certainly when people are killed, you can say, that was not great. And what quickly happened is people came out and started to write articles and to say things like, this isn't who we are as a people. What I found interesting was almost the same week, a golfer who it was named Justin Thomas was heard on a microphone saying something that was derogatory to another nationality. And he quickly came out and said, "It's not who I am." Just this last week, Kevin Durant was found some of his tweet or his personal text messages were revealed by somebody else, and they were very derogatory in the way that they spoke. And he said, "This isn't how I want people to see me, think of me." See, there's a thing inside of us that says whenever something isn't pleasing, that's not who I am. But what the cross tells us, and Jesus' statement, "It is finished," tells us is it's exactly who we are. People who are lost, who need a Savior, who can't pay the price, who can't be good enough to earn our way with God. And in the narrative just leading up to this section of the cross, we have the denial of Peter. And the reason that I point to this is because sometimes when you read about Peter, and this is where he denied Jesus 3 different times, but at one point here in chapter 18, verse 17, he's asked directly, they say, "Are you one of this man's disciples, aren't you?" And Peter responded, "I am not. I am not." It was cold, it says, and the servants and officials stood around the fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself. And so Peter, in this moment, denies Jesus. And we might be tempted to think that Peter was just somebody who was weak. But if you read through the Gospels, what you see is Peter was one of the early adapters to Jesus' message in chapter 6. You see that he didn't want to have Jesus wash his feet in chapter 13 because he understood that Jesus was the Son of God. In chapter 18, he pledges his life. In other words, what we see in Peter is somebody who's courageous, passionate, perceptive, loyal, somebody who was willing to give his life. And yet, it was Peter who, when the pressure was on, said, I don't know him. I'm not one of his followers. And it stands as a reminder that Jesus died not because he wanted to model something. He does model something, but because we're sinful and need a Savior on our behalf. Now, some people think it's not helpful to talk about sin. But in understanding our sinfulness, what happens is it allows us to stop pretending and to stop judging, because we can finally say it's not the basis of who I am, because who I am needs a Savior. And that's part of the reason that we come together year after year, week after week, to talk about one who died. Earlier this year, there was a well-known Christian leader who had died, and things started to come out after his death about some nefarious things that he had been about. Man who had traveled the world, spoken to millions, written books, had a huge international ministry. And people were shocked, rightly shocked, because it's fair and right to say we hold our leaders to a higher standard. But one of the things that I heard people say is, how could this be? How could somebody do this? To which I just want to say, because it's who we are. It doesn't make it okay. But the doctrine of sin tells us that this is exactly why we need a Savior. And like Peter, that Christian leader was able to on one hand do good, while at the same time denying the reality of Jesus in his life. And this is why we come to the cross over and over, because whenever it is that we come to a place where we say, that is who I am, we recognize our need for Jesus Christ to be our Savior and our sacrifice. In John 19, Jesus is recorded as saying on the cross, "It is finished." It's a single Greek word, tetelestai. And if you ever study Greek, what you quickly learn is that there are a bunch of different endings for every Greek word. And you learn how to parse a verb, and it tells you something that's very specific about that Greek word. In this instance, there are two things that are noteworthy that are captured a little bit in this word is, partly in the whole phrase. The first is that the phrase is perfect. It's in the perfect tense. And what that means is that it's a past action with continuing results, ongoing results. So when Jesus says, it is finished, part of what he's saying grammatically is what is happening here and now will have ongoing effects into the future. Certainly, as the people who were gathered there knew, the way that they came to God was by making a sacrifice, an animal sacrifice, as a way to say the sin has been covered. And Jesus was saying, now the sin is covered by me, once and for all. And so for 2,000 plus years now, what Jesus did still has continuing results. And this is completely different from other religions of the world that say what happened was that somebody taught you something, a way, a path, and that you follow the path. And if you follow the path well enough, then you're okay. It's Jesus who says, no, what I did is what makes you right. It was Buddha's instruction that said, live or strive without ceasing. But it was Jesus who said, it is finished. One author put it this way. He said, ponder the achievement of God. God doesn't condone our sin, nor does he compromise his standard. He doesn't ignore our rebellion, nor does he relax his demands. Rather than dismiss our sin, he assumes our sin and incredibly sentences himself. God is still holy, sin is still sin, and we are redeemed because it was finished, and it is finished. And the second aspect of the word tetelestai, when it's parsed into an English form, is that it's a passive verb. So it's perfect, something that happened in the past with continuing effects, and it's passive. And what that means, very simply, is that the person isn't doing the action who gets to say it's finished, but it's done on their behalf. In other words, when Jesus says it is finished, he's not saying that you finish it. I'll take it part way and you take it the rest of the way. What he's saying is it is done and you can't add to it. I don't know if you ever received a handmade gift from a kid. It's one of those sweet moments in life when a child comes to you and presents you with something as if to say, I made this for you. But do you know what would diminish the beauty of that moment? Is if when your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephew, your cousin handed you a homemade art project, something that they drew, and you took it and you looked at it and you thought, this would really be better if they had a little more blue in the sky. And so you sat down and you got out your own colored pencil and you started to edit and improve on the thing that was given to you as a gift. You see, the fact that Jesus says it is finished, it's passive. It's his way of saying, you can't improve on what I've already done because I've paid what you never could. And I've given you what you cannot get any other way. It is finished. It is done. So Jesus cried out, tetelestai. Our English translation is, it is finished. We talked about the it, what was finished, the is, the timing and the duration of it, and now I want to just talk for a moment about this idea of finished. The word literally had a connotation of a debt being paid in full. In classical Greek, it would often be used to connote something that had been paid and no longer needed to be paid. And here's the implication. You see, what we often want to do when it comes to salvation and to the idea of what God has done is we want to say, this is about what I do. It's about my achievement. I'll do it. I'll do my part. In fact, it's very American to say the motto of Christianity is similar to a shoe marketing campaign, just do it. But again, Jesus phrases it is finished. Maybe we're not that brazen, but we at least think that there's a cooperation element. Jesus did his part, I'll do my part. And this has a little bit of merit because in Philippians, there's a section that says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And so some people may say, well, then I need to do my part. But Jesus doesn't say, I'll do my part, you do your part in order to be good. He says, it is finished. I've done it all. I still want you to work it out with fear and trembling, but it's not because you are somehow cooperating with what I've done. Some of us will just simply deny this whole idea. We'll say nothing needs to be paid because we'll say it's not who I am. And then some of us may just be under the idea of a delusion that says it'll all work out. Whatever needs to be will be. But this phrase, it is finished, is Jesus' declaration in his last moments of certainty about what it means to have a relationship with God in Jesus Christ. Maybe the most simple way to think about this is an experience that I had not long ago where I had left my wallet at home and I was with some friends. And we were in a place where we all were paying for something. And when it was my time to pay, I didn't have any money. And it was a mild embarrassment, or maybe you could say it was orchestrated. It was actually a mild embarrassment. But here's the thing. I had already incurred a debt. I had already participated in the event, and if somebody had not covered me in that moment, I would not have had the ability to pay. And what Jesus has done is he said, you will not have the ability to pay. You don't have a wallet at home. You don't have a credit card. You don't have a bank account that's big enough, that's substantial enough to get you where you need to go, but it is finished. I have paid. And that is what Jesus achieved on the cross. There's a hymn that was written years ago by Isaac Watts. And the words go like this. And I'd like to just read this as a prayer, as a way just to kind of meditate on what it means when we say it is finished. When I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I count but loss and pour contempt on all my pride. Forbid it, Lord, that I should boast, save in the death of Christ my God. All the vain things that charm me most, I sacrifice them to his blood. See from his head, his hands, his feet, sorrow and love flow mingled down. Did e'er such love and sorrow meet, or thorns compose so rich a crown? Were the whole realm of nature mine, that were a present far too small. Love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all. And just before our team comes back, I just want to say to you who are here and watching online, that because it's finished doesn't mean you participate in it unless you acknowledge your need and ask Jesus to be your substitute, your Savior, to ask what his work be counted on your behalf. And the way that you do that tonight is just by saying, God, I know that I am the person who needs your son's work. And so I receive that as my own, and it's finished on my behalf. And if you're a person who's been a person of faith for a long time, then maybe tonight is just another reminder, another moment to say, I am going to worship and say, God, were the whole realm of nature mine, it'd be a present far too small because I've been given something that I can never get on my own. And so, God, I worship you with my whole heart once again here tonight.